Welcome to Big Hearted Indy, where we empower men in Indianapolis to forge deep connections and impactful lives through authentic friendships and service. Join us as we explore personal growth, community leadership, and the transformative power of living out our faith in action. The podcast is produced by Citizen 7, and it is hosted by Greg Enas, Don Palmer, and I'm Chris Spangle. And our guests today are Vop Osili, who is the president of the Indianapolis City Council, and Jay Height, Executive Director of the Shepherd Community Center. So this is going to be a really exciting episode. We've got Don here, but Greg, why don't you tell us how'd you get introduced to these two, and then why you wanted to have Vop and Jay on?
Well, I met Jay many years ago, and I've just seen Vop around at important places, like opening up, ribbon cuttings and things in neighborhoods that meant a lot to me. But Jay's been in the East Side neighborhood for a long time. I remember, I think, Jay, you were on the Lilly campus decades ago, doing amazing things with people who were employees. And they said, Greg, you got to meet this guy, Jay Height, who moved here from a state we won't mention today, and moved here to Indy. And so got to know Jay, been working there with Shepherd, and then to know a bit of Vop's story, to see him show up in the harder places of our city and being keen on seeing those places resurrected to life. And so Don and I thought that finding this deep friendship between Vop and Jay, we'd want to amplify their own personal stories today and their story together and what they might be calling us and our audience forward to in 2026. So with that, I'll let Jay introduce himself, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, then you can turn it over to Vop to do the same.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Greg and Don, to allow me to be here. I am a worthless nut. I'm from that state to the east and grew up there, but I've lived now half my life in Hoosier land. Okay. And so I turned 60 this year and 30 years here. My family came here from Cincinnati, and we've been serving on the east side, a beautiful community that has lots of challenges, but has lots of blessings. And so that's where we live, work, and worship. And so we're excited to be part of what is Hoosier land, and excited for, we got some really good football going on this year in both Ohio and in Indiana. And so, and married to my great bride for almost 38 years, 3 kids, all married, and 9 grandkids. And, my theology is that grandkids is God's way of paying us back for living through middle school with our kids.
That's good.
And so I got 9, so that must have been,
paid
he had
you
a lot
back
of
in
payback.
spades. That's great, Jay. Well, welcome.
Yep.
And Vop, welcome to Big Hearted Indy. Please share a bit of your story with us.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. It's been great getting to know all of you. Vop Osili, I'm an architect. I'm also on the City County Council. I am a 5th generation Indianapolis native through my mom, who met my father, who came from Nigeria when they were attending a school at Purdue many, many moons ago. I've got a fantastic wife. Her name is Una. I've got 2 amazing kids. One's in grad school. The other is trying to get into college. And so these are pretty interesting times, I think. Especially for our daughter who's trying to get into college. But I've had just an amazing time, I think, and an amazing blessing, having served on the City County Council now for 13 years, and with some great colleagues, and just feel incredibly blessed.
That's great. Well, I'm a Hoosier too, and I'm a transplant from California. Don's a native Hoosier, and we can hear from him. But one thing that keeps me here is our native Hoosiers and those who have adopted this great city. And we'd like to hear more about your life here. And I think we'll start with Vop. What are since you grew up here, what are some of those formative experiences for you that have shaped you and have really formed to who you are today, and where you believe God is taking you moving forward?
All right. So I grew up in 2 places. I grew up here on the west side in Hawville, but I also spent time in my childhood in Nigeria, where my father was from. I would say the greatest shaping, though, came from living with my grandparents And so there were 3 generations of folks in the household. There was a stability that my grandparents had. They were married for just weeks shy of 50 years.
Mm.
And, they'd gone through the Depression, they'd gone through just a number of things. But there was a solidity that they exhibited that wasn't based on where they came from, how much money they had, or any of those things. It was based on a character, a heaviness of character, a meaningful character that they both had. My last memory of my grandfather, because I was here, we lived with him when he passed. At 10th and Pershing, my last memory on the morning that my grandfather died was him, as I'm waving in the back seat, was him sweeping the sidewalk in front of our house. Mm. And, my grandparents did not have money, mm-hmm. but they had a level of dignity that they shared, with their neighbors. Mm. That, we live here, it is ours, we're going to respect it, because in respecting this, we're going to, we're respecting, our neighbors, and we're respecting our community. That, I think, went a long way for me. And then my father, on the other side of the ocean, had a position in Nigeria's government. And the integrity that he had in the position that he held, I can now look back and say that I'm grateful. At a time when there was unbelievable corruption, my father refused to participate. Mm. And now, when you're a kid and, you see a lot of your friends like living large.
That's right. Got to roll it.
I would go back like, hey, Dad, what's
how
up?
How come I don't have that?
Yeah, how come we don't have
That's right.
But, there was one thing he said, and it always sticks with me, and that was, the moment that you take like a bribe, mm-hmm. you have lost your integrity.
Yes.
I mean, and it was, and it's not something that you get back.
Right.
And I can see it now, especially in local government, just in government and, in general. The moment that you do it, it's over.
Yeah.
And I owe a lot, I think, to him, to my mother, and to my grandparents in that respect.
Wow, that is so powerful. Dignity of humankind and integrity. Living that out. Thank you. Well, Jay, you've been about the dignity of your own, starting with your home, but also with your neighborhood. Why don't you tell us a little about your shaping forces, and why are you so keen on seeing human dignity and human flourishing come about with those that normally would be discarded and marginalized?
Yeah, I often say every child is going to be mentored. The question's by who. Mm-hmm. And I have been blessed over the years to have great teachers who I don't remember a thing they taught me. Mm-hmm. I just remember how they lived their life. Mm-hmm. Coaches and Sunday school teachers, and it started with my own family, but I was blessed to grow up in a home where my father modeled what it is to be a Christian man. Mm-hmm. And then I had this series of folks who invested in this obnoxious little kid who his nickname was Tornado. And I still try to live that out at 60.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah. And then even in the 30 years here in Indianapolis, God puts people like yourselves into my journey to help model for us. And you're both, Don and Greg, your commitments to Christian community. The virus, the challenge of our city that Vop is one of our leaders of, is this epidemic of loneliness mm-hmm. and isolation, where people don't think anyone knows they have a name.
Yeah. And,
there's studies that show that a lot of senior adults go months without anyone speaking their name. And that's tragic, but you begin to understand that in isolation and loneliness isn't based on proximity to people or the lack of proximity. It's the lack of connection. And I think that has been a driver for me because folks taught me that. I was part of a team. I belonged.
Yeah.
And I believe those gangs that operate to the detriment of our city sometimes are outworking us.
Mm-hmm.
They're building that identity in that community. And so the folks who've modeled it here in Indianapolis and many great Christian business leaders who have invested in me, I feel like it's paying it forward, and it's time for us to keep pushing and to work harder than we've ever worked.
So let me follow up on that. So the epic of isolation, loneliness, we hear so much about it. And it can happen to white collar folk, right?
Yeah.
You're working in your home. You're there on a Zoom almost all day. Everything's delivered to you. And sometimes your neighbors, they're playing in their backyards, not in their front yards. So how do you, as the Shepherd Community Center or as a pastor, how do you operationalize? How can you go to a group of folk and say, okay, in the next 30 days, people aren't going to be as isolated by our activity due to our intentionality?
Well, you make a point that the problem of isolation and loneliness is seen in a dramatic change in architecture. So it's architect's fault. No, the porch went from the front to the back. And when the porch went to the back, what did we put around our yards? Privacy fences. It used to be, growing up in Dayton, Ohio, my dad would come home and park in the driveway and say hi to the neighbor guy who got home at the same time, Mr. Amos. They'd wave and talk about their day. But then what happened? We invented garage door openers. And so the research I've seen, 31% of Americans know who their neighbors are. And so we open it, all the windows are shut because we now have central air.
Yeah.
And so this change in architecture has changed the lives that we lived. I mean, as kids, we would run out the front door, off the front porch, and play up and down the street. I was spanked by every mom on that block. And all it took was one mom to say it's lunchtime. You all ran home and you ran up the porch into the house, you ate lunch, and then you were back out playing. But we don't live that way. And I think tragically, social media has tried to create an artificial mechanism to have friends and to do these things, these likes and things, where it used to be you sit down and talk, or our parents would sit on the front porch with the neighbors and talk while we played in the evening.
So what have you done in your neighborhood to impact isolation?
Yeah. So I would say this, it's not a Shepherd community issue. It's a Don, Greg, Vop, Jay, Chris issue. Mm-hmm. It has to be a personal call.
Yeah.
And it means that tonight when I walk home or I drive home and then get out of my car, I see my neighbor and I go over and talk to him. Mm. Or my wife who goes over and checks on the elderly lady that lives across the street. Or when we go out and one of the things we're trying to do is deliver food to folks who can't get out. And it's taking time to just go talk. We have to be interruptible. Mm. And we have to be open to those moments that God gives us to have those opportunities to just talk to someone. And the point I try to make is I try to make sure in a conversation I'm going to say their name.
And Vop, with that, what drew you into architecture? What innate, inherent traits do you have that your passion was there? And how have you, what then translated from being an architect into wanting to serve our city in the way you have? Tell us a little bit about that journey. And then I'd like to, down the road, talk about how you collectively met and some of the friendship impact that's occurred.
I think I was blessed because by the age of like 7, I knew that I wanted to be an architect, but most because I could envision what a space could look like. And I recall saying to my mother, I want to be able to shape space. And so if you all remember, I don't know if they still do it, in the Sunday paper, they used to have floor plans of homes that were being built, or designs for people to, to order, to build new homes. And I just ate that up. It was my favorite thing to look at. And my mom would, on occasion, take me out to like a building site. So I've always wanted this thing of sort of creating and having a vision for what could be. What could this space feel like? How would it impact my mood?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes forward into politics. In how do we shape something? How do we create something that can alter someone's circumstances?
Mm-hmm.
And that is how I find myself thinking about a lot of things, which sometimes it takes me a moment to kind of, how do we get there? Because I can see it. I can see how we could make something better. Now the route is, how do we make that happen? So I think that was sort of the relationship. But the desire to go into politics started in college, just reading some biographies. But it got ignited by a lady who just took me under wing, and, God bless her. And that was the late Julia Carson.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting to know her, knowing the strength of her character and her commitment to the people that she served, it was unquestionable.
Mm-hmm.
And she carried a lot on her shoulders, but she had a heart for the city of Indianapolis and her constituents. And I don't know that I could have gotten a better example of a real servant than Julia. Now, I say Julia now. I never, ever dared call her by that name. Never once. It was Mrs. Carson, or she allowed me to call her grandma for some reason. But the example that she said. So, I do see parallels now when I think about the future of the city of Indianapolis. I see a parallel because I can see where we can go.
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea now how we can get there and how we can get there collectively. So it is something that, it's not just for the few, it's for all. How do we become this city that other people want to get to?
Mm-hmm.
No longer this sort of flyover country, no longer in the leagues of the Columbuses and Cincinnati's. Not that there's anything wrong with those two.
No.
For anyone who might
Keep
be
going,
from Ohio.
preach it.
Better air.
Yeah. But a destination place. And then, I think when we start having a different form of investment in our constituents, that they become the very best ambassadors for the city of Indianapolis, of a great place to live and to raise a family.
Yes. And Chris?
Yeah, so we've got a question. This goes back to neighborliness. We record this on Zoom the last Monday, the fourth Monday of every month, and you can sign up on the emailing list at citizen7indy.com. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can get the emailing list, and we'll tell you when that is, so you can join us at noon and spend your lunch with us, and you can ask a question live. You may be listening to this later on the podcast feed, but we've got 15 people watching, so you two are a big draw here on our private Zoom. But Don Wettrick, the great Don Wettrick, said, what are some of the best practices you've seen in the past 5 years or so to get neighbors to be more neighborly?
I think one, modeling it. We have to live it out. In my case, shepherd is my vocation. It's my calling, but loving my neighbor is Jay Height's call. And so I think modeling and living that out. And then many times I think the danger is we want to do ministry to our neighbors when we need to do it with our neighbors. And so creating opportunities where we can serve together creates that bond. And, yeah.
He used the right word. It's the modeling. It is the being proactive about reaching out to your neighbors, having like a porch gathering, taking over some pie, taking care of their dog. Yeah. But I think in order to expect it, I think that we gotta do it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, as you were talking, politics is a great way to get to understand the community, and then so is service. I spent the weekend with a family member who lives an hour west out in Hendricks County, and was saying, yeah, we're thinking about buying in this area of town, and they were like, you can't do that. It's so dangerous. What are you going to do? And hearing you talk about pies and porching, like, can you give us an on-the-ground report for people who may be living in the donut counties and have a certain perception of what it's like to live in Marion County? Give us like a full picture of what the city's like and what the pulse is here in terms of interpersonal relationships.
Well, yes, you're going to see reports of violence. You're going to see and read different things. But what you never hear, and I have great friends in the media, is what the neighbors are doing to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
The lady who my wife and I deliver food to, and she takes it and makes stews, and then she can tell us who she goes to. I'm going to take it down to that house, and that's it. There is great community still present. And one of the conversations that Vop and I talk quite a bit about is, how do we make Indianapolis to be a city where everyone belongs?
Mm-hmm.
That you don't have to look a certain way or speak a certain way or have a certain income. And the diversity that comes in living in Indianapolis is such a blessing. My kids grew up in a much different world than I might have in suburbia. And so I think Indianapolis is a great place to live, work, and worship because of, one, great leaders like Vop and others who care, but it's the opportunity we have to live life together.
Right on. I think we hear about some of the violence far more or disproportionately than we hear about the lady across the street who, is looking after, my son, before we get home. That we hear about those things, and unfortunately, that is maybe that persona. But think about this. This is one of the most welcoming cities that you can find in the country. Outsiders see it, I think, a lot better than we even see it. When we are boxing way above our weight class, when it comes to bringing visitors to our city, be it for conventions and meetings and that sort of thing, and the reports that they give, we can see what an amazing city this is. And we see it even more when we're having some big activity. The biggest thing that I think we've had, and one of the biggest things we've had, generally around sports, but you think about the Super Bowl and you think about, Final Four, NCAA, the ways that folks come together. There is a camaraderie that we have here, but we don't report those things about the porch parties. This weekend, there must have been 100 activities, neighborhood activities, where folks just got together and socialized, and made friends and shared like goals and just shared love.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hear about those things. What we hear about is, there was a shot fired. Well, we will hear about those things. We've got free, great access to weapons. But you don't hear about the love that we have for our communities in this city. And that is incredibly deep. And I'm hoping that, a podcast like this and others will let people start to sort of ponder, how do we have 900,000 people living in a city that is known for its friendliness? I didn't go to high school here, so I'm going to confess that. I wish I could say that I was, from one of the cool schools. I better not name one before I miss one out. But I finished high school overseas, and because of my pride in this city, we had a high school reunion. The determination was it was going to be in America. and it was either going to be in LA or Chicago or New York. And I used a little bit of my own influence on this through all of this and said, no, we're going to have it here. And it's going to be in Indianapolis.
There you go.
Now, I'll be honest. Some of my old classmates, it was a Catholic boys' school. Some of my old classmates were like, do you guys have an airport? It's like, oh, okay. It is so on right now. It's so on. I mentioned that because by the time they came with their families, their wives and so on, and saw our city and experienced, our residents, they were incredibly blown away that we didn't know this place existed. So, that may not answer your question fully, but we have a love in this city for one another and a belief in the city. Our job is to continue to do our bit to sew and to knit that tighter, that our neighbors, that we are the best possible neighbors, and we set an example of neighborliness in our city.
Patrick Cowherd says, I lived in Hamilton County for 20 years and have lived in Marion for 4 years now, and I absolutely love the diversity here. There is violence everywhere. You just don't hear about it everywhere, but it's still there. Bottom line, Indianapolis is a great place to live. And I'd add that I've lived in Marion County for 4 years, and I had the same experience. I loved it. I love being here. So, Greg, why don't you ask the next question?
So just piggybacking on this love notion and friendship here, how did you both meet? What brought you together, and what has fostered the affection, the brotherly affection you have for each other, into the collective mission that you have here?
Do you remember the date?
I do not.
Okay. So on my contacts, I always put the date that I meet somebody.
Okay, good.
So it always helps. October the 7th, 2013. And Andrew Hart actually introduced us. It was by email. Yeah. Do I get some brownies?
You do. Yeah,
brownies or something?
Let's take out the gloves. And probably a pretty good chance you being in politics and you being a resident and a person representing a particular area, advocating for city funds or city things. When was a time where you disagreed, and what do you guys do to keep the communication up?
I will say this, and I have, in my life, having been involved in politics earlier on, Vop and I have a relationship that allows us to disagree. He's wrong, but that's okay. We can disagree, and
fair enough.
But we don't argue. We try to find solutions, and that's what I love in my conversations. Here's a problem. Let's solve it. So last winter we had an issue about snow, and he heard from me on that because trying to deliver food in our neighborhood we just couldn't do it. It was too dangerous.
Right.
And he and his colleagues on council came up with a solution. And so I think we have our conversations at his office at Wild Eggs, and
Yeah, that's true.
But we talk more about life and about our faith, and I think that's where we have a genuine relationship that is not me trying to convince him to do something that he should or shouldn't do.
And Vop, how do you live with the guy that's always right?
It teaches me great humility. How about that? Kind of like being married.
Yeah.
Yes, my wife teaches me a lot of humility. I don't own up to it, but I'm paying attention and learning the lessons. I think with Jay's approach is always one that you can tell that it is coming from love and the love of a community, and a desire to use the gifts that God has given each one of us to maximize that work. And I find myself listening more than anything else when I'm with Jay. Because he is coming from a place of great thought, And how do I model that very same thing? How do I act on that in that same way to accomplish something? And Jay's work in the community has been transformational. And how do I use such a thing in the positions that I hold here in our city with the consistency that he has for the past 30 years? I mean, he's an amazing example of utilizing the gifts that God has given him.
So you both are leaders in the public space, where your faith needs to be practiced, not preached, right? I have the diverse citizenry. So how has faith shaped your leadership, especially, Bob, when decisions are complex? And you had a lot of contentious issues just this last 12 months or so around the city council and around the city. So how does it shape your leadership, particularly when consensus is difficult?
I think one has to go back to the very core of one's belief. How would I want to be treated? And if I make a mistake, how do I rectify it? But what is fair? When I first got on the council 13 years ago, one of the things that I was able to lead in and help to change laws in our city had to do with reentry. And knowing the things that I have done in my life, especially when I was young and in college, and just the things that were worthy of some engagement with with law enforcement, so to speak, and realizing that I and my colleagues who walk the face of this earth are walking because we just didn't get seen doing the things that we were doing, made me incredibly sensitive to those individuals who have served time because of the ways that we have treated them as though whatever they did at the same age that we were all doing it is something that they will continue to do for life. And so back in 2013 and 2014, sort of establishing the ban the box law or ban the box ordinance, which was the removal of the box and application forms that ask about criminal history, and recognizing that my past does not dictate my future. And then how do I then get others to see that very same thing? And how do we take the stigma off of people? So those are sort of basics of, people may have a problem with those who have criminal records. And I get that. That's fine. But we just should not treat them any differently or stigmatize them for the rest of their lives. If they have paid their debt to society and have in their hearts, how do I become a model citizen? Who am I then to say, but do you remember what you did when you were 18? Do you know? I don't even know in this room here. And I'm looking around to some really very, very good men in here. I'm looking around thinking, surely one of y'all has sinned. I'm thinking, surely one of you may have just very lightly broken the law, right? Okay. So what would happen if that hung around your head forever? Now, when it comes to the other, because you ask a very strong question, what happens when we don't have consensus or when it requires acting on your belief and your conviction. And the chips then have to fall where they fall. But if I have a conviction of something, I will try and share it. I won't try and force your hand on anything, but I'll give you my reasons. And here's why I believe X or Y. And then, leave it up to the other person then to, either ponder that and try to understand, at least my viewpoint. I've learned in politics that trying to hammer somebody into something, it's like being a parent and trying to hammer your kids into, you will do this and that, generally backfires. People, I think, are strongest on the convictions that they willfully, or willingly, I should say, come to, or the convictions that they come to on their own. And here's my position. I don't come about it lightly. And here's why I'm thinking this way. I just want to put it in front of you, hope that you can consider this when it comes time for a vote. I think that's the only way. We don't live in a dictatorship. Well,
Not here.
Yeah. I mean, Indianapolis is not a government of a dictatorship. And so I can't tell you what to do, but I can just give you my reasons.
Jay, are there particular political issues or justice issues that you're trying to champion and as an expression of your faith? Whether it's reentry or whether it's upskilling.
I want to add this one part. Yeah. He talks about not letting our past label us. Mm-hmm. Read Matthew 1. It's exciting. The begats.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the names that are in that list in the lineage of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And there's some scandalous people in there.
Definitely.
And Jesus is in their lineage. That's an important message to us, that good can come out of folks who've made wrong decisions. I think for me, I am trying to be an advocate for our children. We're in a lot of controversy right now about IPS and our educational systems. And I encourage folks to just take a step back and remember we're talking about kids. We can disagree on bus service or this or that. At the end of the day, what's best for their kids? And again, we're going to come back to every kid's going to be mentored. Questions by who? And I'd much rather invest in them when they're 5, 6, 7 years old than incarcerate them when they're 19, 20, or 21. And those kids who are making bad choices at older ages weren't born that way. Things happen or didn't happen for them. And I don't want to give any excuse to someone to say you didn't have the opportunity.
Do we know what the best practices are from around the world to make this city as I would say, you mentioned a destination place. I believe God is actually moving us from just being a destination where people fly in and fly out for different things to a city of destiny. A city of destiny. Where can we glean? Or maybe we're already there. It's just a matter of execution. But how can we in the audience really propel us forward to this vision that you're articulating?
I think the one of the conversations that Vop and I have a lot about is we got to build more homes.
Okay.
We need more housing because if we have folks moving here, and they are, that's going to burden an already difficult housing market. And then we get into displacement. And for many of our neighbors, there's no place to go. And so affordability is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And at a time when we're seeing government withdraw itself from the safety net, if we're not stepping up, and quite honestly, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm telling you the church was what was created to be that safety net. It was never government. And so this is the opportunity for us to reclaim the mantle. Mm-hmm. And I was at a meeting where some pastors were talking about how do we use our space to maybe build on? How do we take lots of green space and make it houses that families could live in? And so I think we have to tackle that, and we have to make sure we are investing in our kids.
Okay.
What you mentioned the safety net. We went a few weeks without SNAP. Can you tell us what that was like and what you saw and what the community did, and kind of walk us through the last month?
It was catastrophic. The folks who are on SNAP are the working poor. And there's this misnomer that they, lots of misinformation. What I saw was the church step forward, and a certain church called us and said, we're going to write you a check, go buy food. And then our great friends at Gleaners did, and we were distributing them through schools and others. And we did a drive-through pantry, and over 1,000 boxes went out to families who didn't know how to get food otherwise. Mm-hmm. Those who come to our food pantry aren't the same people necessarily that get SNAP. And so it was a horrific time, because it would be very common for someone to go to the grocery store, use their card, and not know, because many of my neighbors are not reading the news and didn't know that SNAP had been shut down. And so I encourage DC to figure out how to work together. This isn't an R country. It's not a D country. It's the United States of America, not the divided states. We need to work together so that our neighbors can survive and thrive. And I think the church needs to take the lead.
Right on. And Vop, how can Indy take the lead to show the nation how to do it? And where are we failing that we need to ramp up on so that we can be that light, that city set on a hill for our nation?
I think in many ways we're not even aware of certain of the challenges, because when Indianapolis natives learn about challenges, they step up, and it is a matter of us. I think even in this room, how do we let folks know that others are experiencing certain challenges? We do come together when we have crises in the city, and how do we let the rest of the world know? It is when we continue to do it, and folks know that Indianapolis is a city that doesn't shun, that doesn't repel individuals, but embraces them. There's probably not community corporation or a church in this county that wasn't working to organize around providing food for individuals during this period that you asked about.
Mm-hmm.
This is a city that gives. It's literally one of the most philanthropic cities that we have here in our country. And it's probably doing more boasting than we do, because and those things don't necessarily work well together.
Right.
Having a really philanthropic heart and boasting, they just don't. But the city does, and I think even if we don't boast on ourselves, maybe there will be enough data in the coming years to indicate that this is a place that cares about its neighbors.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here and I watch the news. I see Channel 13 and all the local stations. It's overwhelming. Shootings, the wars around the world. What's your advice to our listeners to not have that fatigue that comes from exposure to that? How do we catalyze hope and faith versus discouragement?
I think one of the dangers is we think that we need to step back away, and I need to shut all this off because I need some me time to take care of myself. I just read this article. It says, if you want to encourage yourself, if you want to refill yourself, give. It's to go serve. It's engage with your community, because if you're ever at Shepherd Community and you see me walking around, I've had a rough day because I'm looking at the kids. That refills me. Their joy in life and talking to them, and they're not worried about it. They're just worried, is it pizza day for lunch?
Yeah.
And some of them are living in very difficult situations, but they've got a smile. And I think it's a reminder to me. There's a song by Third Day. It says, "Christmas like a child." And I need to have that attitude of a child, that I act like a child at times. I'm sure my wife would agree, but that attitude of a child of, you know what, I'm just having fun, and I got pizza for lunch, so it's a great day. Those are the things that I think we have to remind ourselves. It's sometimes little victories amidst the pain and hurt of a very difficult world.
There is tons of scriptures that talk about gratitude, and when I get a little ahead of myself and thinking about, well, I didn't get this done, or I don't have that, or something or other. And my wife sent me something, this weekend, and a friend sent me something last week about being grateful. That, I think, at least for me, that does help me to rein in and stop looking stop looking outward at what our community doesn't have, or what what I wish we had, and saying, you know what, but we do have this, and so let's use it. And
you're counting your assets and also your blessings, right?
absolutely. And this city has a lot, but whether or not there's money, and I was explaining to you about my grandparents, there was this groundedness that they had. They did not have money, but there was a groundedness. And growing up, I mean, in their house, I didn't know we didn't have any money.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, there you go.
But there was a solidity there and a safety there that I have to go back to. Like, it's not about grousing, and it's about sort of holding and being grateful.
Avoiding the comparison game.
Oh, well, that's disastrous from day one.
We won't step up if it's done out of compulsion. God loves a cheerful giver. And if we're going to be that city that gives of ourself, of time, talent, and treasure to each other in love, it stems from gratitude. And there's a great story in what God has done for us in Christ, how he's brought us together as friends and co-laborers. And I hope that continues to resonate, that gratitude's the base of that, because the result of investment based on gratitude is joy. And you mentioned joy. What if joy was palpable in our homes, between husbands and wives and kids? I mean, it sounds like a miracle, but on the streets, in the schools, that sense that it's not happiness, which sometimes depends on circumstance, the ups and downs. Life is hard and good. Happiness depends on those things, but that ultimate joy in this city, I think that people from where I'm from in the San Francisco Bay Area, from New York City, where I thought I'd live instead of Indianapolis, they're going to say, Indy's something special. There's something palpable here. I want to be a part of that.
So one thing I heard both of you talk about, the importance of family and the importance of character and the dignity you saw in your grandparents and your parents. So one of the ways we get to a flourishing city is have more flourishing families.
Mm-hmm.
What would be two suggestions, two ideas, our listeners to say, hey, we're going to try to be 1% better, this week or this holiday season, et cetera. What are two things that they should consider to as habits or rituals for their family?
I would say this through the holidays. So not just Thanksgiving, but through Christmas.
Right.
Find a family that you can bless, but bless the parents so they can bless the kids. Empower them. They want to be the heroes for their kids, right? And, years ago, we would get tickets to different sporting events and we would take kids and have a great time. And a dad said to me, I wish I could take my kids. And so now we give tickets to families. So figure out how you bless a family.
There you go.
And but do it as a family so that your kids see that. And I think one of the blessings I have, it's not great for my retirement, but all three of my kids are in ministry and their spouses. I thought one of them would make money, but no. Is they will say, we just did ministry as a family. That's what they knew. And I would encourage you to do ministry as a family. And as men, find ways to engage your bride and your kids, even if they're adults, to do it with you.
We've already talked about what we will be doing this holiday. Son comes back from grad school. Our daughter's already here. It always comes back to, what are we putting back out there? What are we volunteering to do? How are we helping out? And that does take me out of myself. Especially when I realize I've been focused too much on what's right in front of me. I think we need to be thinking about what's best for our neighborhood. And you don't have to go very far. I mean, there are any number of opportunities in our community development corporations, in our religious institutions, within our own neighborhoods. But I want to say something else. In terms of stability. Jay mentioned something, and it does go back down to housing. It's one of those basic needs. And if I can just get this in here, it is one of our most basic needs. We have a need for food, and we have a need for shelter. And how do we create that stability? Some of it is new housing stock, yes, but the other is how do we preserve our existing housing stock? And then how do we preserve the dignity of the people who are living in some of the homes that, especially our elderly, that are not in great shape, where the roof is leaking, or the windows are broken, or the steps are uneven. Those things matter. How are we helping, even with something like that? How might we be able to help, knowing that my neighbor across the way has a particular issue? Can we do something tangible along those lines? But I want to just keep it on the housing component. We have a number of homes that need reinvestment. What are we doing about that? How can we volunteer? And whether that is a Habitat for Humanity, or Rebuilding Together, or a Homes for Good, they need assistance. Now, that's something that we could get involved in even right now during this holiday season. How do we help a home be more stable for an elderly resident?
And if I could chime in, one of the things that we're trying to address is creating a tool library, because a lot of times our neighbors need to do a repair on their home and they don't have the necessary tools, and they only need it for this part. And so trying to, if you have extra tools, donate them, but go help that person. It's part of loving your neighbor.
So I go to Redeemer with Greg, and I just attended the Poverty 101 seminar, which I thought was fantastic and really well done. Can you explain what that is, and can other churches, other community groups have that in their location?
Absolutely. I'm blessed to have a colleague for many years, Dr. Tim Streed, who serves with us at Shepherd, has been a phenomenal leader in Indianapolis, and his giftedness is he's the professor. And so we've developed a class called Poverty 101. It's several weeks. He does a condensed version, or he does the longer, intense 8 weeks. And we provide that for anyone, for a business, for a church. We want to help educate folks to understand the complexity that is poverty, that it's not as simple as sometimes we think it is.
So if people want to get engaged with Shepherd, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to our website, shepherdcommunity.org, our phone number, 317-375-0203. Lots of opportunities through the holidays, and we would love to help educate. And our passion too is then to say, maybe you could drive and volunteer, but how do we help you have the tools necessary to engage in your own community, in your own neighborhood, not just ours? Yes, we want that, but we want to help you change your own neighborhood.
So we got to start wrapping up. Greg, I'll let you go, but let Vop and Jay, if there's anything you want to say.
Well,
Don.
This has been fantastic. To Vop's point about housing, Sanctuary Indy, just on the southwest side. Ethan Fernhaber just cast a vision for Don. He's saying, what if we had 777 guys? He said, I'll be the first one to go and do something like help a senior with some housing, siding repair, whatever it might be, but so critical. So closing thoughts from both you. Any final words, and maybe even express gratitude for each other too, so that we can model sort of what you guys have with each other.
Well, I'll let the council president have the last word. So, I care deeply for Vop because he is who he says he is.
Yes.
Lots of folks have reputation, but he lives it. Integrity is who you are when no one's looking. Reputation's what other people say. But I've seen it. And I think for me, the privilege of being here today is to see Don and Greg, two friends for most of my 30 years here, and Vop, who are living it out. Chris, it's great to get to know you. But I'm blessed because of men like you who are living it out. And I cherish those relationships, and I cherish knowing at a time when sometimes folks get a little disgusted with elected leaders, we do have quality folks like Vop who are living it out and who are truly advocating for our city.
Amen. Final word.
I will say thank you first for having me and for having Jay. I have profound respect for this man, and it is the humility that he has in whatever he is doing. I actually didn't know the magnitude of impact that Jay has had in this community. And anyone who asks about Jay, when anyone knows of Jay, the respect that he is held in, there's a reverence, and it is he is a man who has lived by example. I mean, look at him, right? I mean, he's not quite going to be on GQ, right?
Not a chance.
He's plenty handsome.
Oh, he's got it going on. He's got it going on, right? But he's a guy who, however, carries that enormous stick and can get things done and gets things done. Thinks ahead, way into the future, and organizes and reconfigures and makes things happen. It is, I just have so much respect for the man, and I feel incredibly blessed that somehow we got reconnected, and he's been very patient with me, I just thank God. How about that?
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are so glad that you joined us here on the podcast. And thank you, Vop and Jay, for joining us here on the show to share your wisdom and your friendship. Thank you to Don and Greg for being here. And we are so glad that everyone has gotten involved. This has been a fantastic year in Citizen 7. Just had a conversation about what 2025 has meant and how much it's meant to the guys that have come along and how much it's grown this year. We'll talk a little bit more about that next episode. We're out of time today, but if you are hearing this for the first time and you want to join us, please sign up for the emails at citizen7indy.com. That's the number 7, citizen7indy.com. Find us on social media, and if you like this, share it. That's the best way that you can help content creators like Greg, Don, and Citizen 7, and Jay over at Shepherd Community. Follow them. They have a multimedia department. And thank you so much. We'll see you again next month.